Hi everybody, and welcome to the second video looking at the Diamond, the DA40-tdi, which is the sort of very basic version of this aircraft. And this one will concentrate on the X-touch Mini and specifically using it to program the comms and nav part of the Garmin G430. Had a number of new subscribers over the last couple of weeks or so, which is really nice. So welcome everybody. And I don't think everybody is looking at the earlier videos that I did. When I started doing this series, I assumed that people would follow me through, and some people are joining sort of late on and probably haven't looked at some of the early videos where I detailed the setup and one or two settings that you need to look at, which is fair enough. I understand that. So I'm going to take it a bit more slowly, and rather than assume lots of background knowledge, I'm going to make sure that everything I do is pretty well self-contained this time. Okay, so let's get on with it. We'll have a look at what's going on with this G430. So if I bring up my flight simulator, this is the big instrument that we're going to work with. And what I'll do first of all is I'll give you a bit of an overview of how some of it works, what we're trying to achieve, and then I'll show you how I set it up with X's and O's. So we've got this bit here. We're looking at the comms, and there's two radios. There's the communications radio and the navigation radio. It's the one that drives the VOR, the V-lock, so we can lock into a VOR. And really it's controlled by these knobs here. So this is a double rotary, it's a stacked rotary. There's a big knob on the outside, and if you turn that big knob you can see that it changes the megahertz, the large part of the frequency, and the small one does the kilohertz, does this smaller number here. So we can dial in a frequency, and then we can use this button here to do the frequency swap. This is the standby frequency and this is the active. If we press this button here, they swap over and that becomes active and that's standby. So we've just got one radio to play with for the comms, and the same for the nav. Now to control the frequency here, we push this button here. There's a switch on the end of it. So now you can see it's highlighted. That works exactly the same way though. So it does the megahertz and kilohertz. And we've got a separate button to do the swap, mainly because you'll probably spend most of your life in comms talking on the radio, but you may have frequencies set up ready to capture another VOR or capture an ILS approach or something like that. So you don't want to have to change to here, so we can change that standby active without having to exit the comms. So that's what we're going to work on programming up. So inevitably, if you've seen my videos before, I've got a PowerPoint, and what I'll do, I'll also put at the top a camera pointing to my actual X-touch Mini, so you can see when I use the control, you can see what I'm using. So those of you not 100% familiar with the X-touch Mini, it's a MIDI controller. It's sending MIDI data, and it's got 8 rotary switches at the top, and each of these also has a press button on it so that you can click and use it as a button. And underneath that we've got 16 buttons, push buttons, which will have LEDs attached to them as well, so that when you press it, it lights up. Also you can control, and I've shown you in previous videos, and I'm sure we'll come across it again, that you can control the lights on there. And actually this one here has got two banks. There's a layer A and a layer B, so we can give two functions to every single button, knob, switch. So if it's like having 16 rotary switches and 72, I think it is, different press buttons. So quite a versatile device. Everything I'm going to do today is on layer A. If I want to do layer B, I would press, and you can probably see that it's lit up here, but we're doing everything on layer A. So when I label my template, I put the layer A's above the buttons, and I'll do the same here on my PowerPoint. So it's really quite simple what we're trying to line up today. We got doing the comms, the VOR on this section here, so it's all going to be concentrated around here. And what we'll do is we'll allocate this as the outer button, the big button, and that'll be my megahertz. and this will be my kilohertz, this one here, and this will be the button that you press on the end of the inner button to change from comms to VLOC and back again. So that will be the swap button. So obviously I need 2 buttons left to do the swap from standby to active, and I need one for the comms and one for the navigation, the V swap. So those 2 buttons there will be doing that. Okay, so that's what we're going to try and achieve. So let me go back to my flight sim, and I'll also bring in my axes and O's. Let's just adjust this camera a little bit. There we go, that's better. Right. So I've got some axes assigned already. One of the queries I had was, what's the difference between the left panel and the right panel here? Well, this is about anything that's got basically potentiometer in it, and axes. So it's got my aileron, so if I move my yoke, you can see that. Some of it I control here, and some of it I leave controlled by the Microsoft software. Basically, the Microsoft software doesn't detect when you change aircraft, so it doesn't change the profile. You have to build a profile if you want to allocate different axes to particularly your throttle quadrant, so you can change to mixture or propeller axes. So I'm going to have that controlled more by the axis nodes, because that does detect which aircraft you come, and take that functionality away from Microsoft, from the flight simulator. So I'm really experimenting with what works best. Some of it I didn't really need to move across, like the brakes and the rudder, but I wanted to experiment and see how it worked, how to set it up. So it's a journey of learning for us. I have to admit, I had a bit of a nightmare trying to set this video up, because when I loaded everything up, nothing was connecting, and every piece of software, my recording software, the OBS software I use, axes and everything had lost all its settings. No idea why. It included the hardware was switched off, so the MIDI devices were no longer enabled, so I couldn't work out why my MIDI controllers weren't working. It had lost this API port, which meant my Stream Deck wasn't working, so I just couldn't see what was going on. The OBS software had denied I had any microphones plugged in. Yeah, that's my story, that's my problem. But it shows you what can go wrong, and you do need to remember your way around this. So these are some of the settings that some people have missed, and the comments I've had is, why can't I get my Stream Deck to talk? And it'll be that's not been switched on or has lost its setting. I'm going to use one more setting here, which will ensure that during this session here that this stays at the front. It doesn't disappear when I click on my Microsoft Flight Simulator. That doesn't disappear. That will probably help things along a little bit. Okay, where to start? Well, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to start by doing the push button here, the one that swaps us between the comms and the voice. So we're going to add an allocation to that, and it's a key down event. And handily, we can do a filter for the 430 device, because in the HTML variables, if you've gathered those correctly, you gather those from the scripting menu before you start Flight Simulator. The first time you install it, you would drag in your H variables and B variables. So you, just in case you haven't seen before, you do that before you start Microsoft Flight Simulator, then start the Flight Simulator, and then read your LVARs in. Now I had problems with that. You have to go as far as detecting an aircraft. You actually have to load and get to an airfield with an aircraft before the LVARs became active. Never had that before, but this is a new version, a new build, and perhaps it's a feature of the new build that you have to have an active aircraft of some kind to read the LVARs. It reads every variable. It's not specific to this aircraft, but you need to read those. Anyway, slightly digressing, we are going to add an assignment, and we've now got a filter set up for the 430. And what we're looking at is the left small knob and what happens when we push it. So double click on there, that's in. So what I'm going to do is push the button, So I'm pushing this button here, and that should detect it. And you can see it's worked out X-touch mini, and which button I've pressed, it's all coded, and that's okay, that's done. So we can add that, and I'll just give it a quick test. So we'll keep an eye on this to see if that changes, swaps over and changes, which it does. So absolutely perfect, we are underway. So let's carry on with that small knob. The small knob can obviously turn in two different directions. I wish this filter would stay on. It is one of the things that does irritate me, because inevitably when you're doing a programming, setting something up, you probably want to keep going back to the same filter for a while. Anyway, it's the left small knob, and it turns in the direction left and right. I always do left first, no idea why. Now, one of the things to keep your eye on here, if you've not done this before, is that I'm going to turn this this is the small one, I'm going to turn that to the left. First time I turn it, it just knows I've clicked it. It doesn't know which direction. It needs to detect the second click to work out which motion you were using, which way you were going. So you turn it twice to the left and it detects it, so we can add that. And what we'll do is we'll just give that a quick test. So we'll keep an eye here on the kilohertz, and you can see that's going down. So the turning right won't do anything because we haven't allocated that, we've only allocated turning left. But you can guess for yourself where we're going with this. So we'll apply the filter, and we'll look for the left small knob going to the right, left small knob going to the right, 2 clicks on that to the right, job done. Okay, so we'll do the large knob, and it's going to be exactly the same process. So we can speed our way through this probably. So it's the left large knob going to the left. Left large knob going to the left. 2 clicks to make sure it says turn left, and it does. And now we'll do to the right. So left large knob right. Now you'll notice there is no left large knob push. There's no push facility in that. The push is only on the small knob. Okay, so that's all done. So we should be able to swap between the two. We can. We'll be able to go up and down on kilohertz, megahertz, going both directions. So that's all okay. So it's just these 2 buttons here to program in. Again, dead easy. Filtering for the 430, and we're looking for the COM swap, which is here. So, and it's just a question of clicking on this button here. 1 click on it. There's no left or right feature on it. It's just a click. Add, and now we'll do the other swap. So there's the 430, and we want the nav swap for this one here, and we'll press that button there to allocate it. Add, and we'll just give this a quick test through. So again, I should be able to go to here, and the kilohertz, megahertz working fine for the V-lock. Let's do a C swap. That's working, and back again, and yeah, that's fine. There's one more feature on this side here to do with the comms and the nav, and that's the CDI button. If I click on here on the actual screen for the CDI, you'll see that it changes from V-lock to GPS, and you've also got an indicator here in the VOR that this display here, that it is actually now being driven by the GPS, and now it's being driven by the frequency if we were tuned into a frequency. So we need that button to be programmed up for the last bit of the nav to work. So if I go to try an allocation here, and we'll look at the 430, it would be here. It's in alphabetical order, and there's no CDI button. We've got pretty much every other button: the menu, the message, range, procedures, the OBS. Every other button is there except the CDI. And the mystery to that is actually it's not particularly a function of here. It's a function of what's driving this. So in fact the best filter to put in for that is drive, and it's called the toggle GPS drives nav1. What's driving nav1? Is it the OBS display, or is it the GPS? So what's happening here? And that's the one we want. So we'll drop that in, and it's going to allocate it to the next button across. That's the CDI one here. So that's the allocation there. So that's the one odd one for this device, is the CDI button. So let's add that, and I'll just test that button here. So I'm going to press the CDI button, and you should see it going between GPS and VLOOK, and it's also happening over here. The indicator there is working. So that's really this side set up. We could change all the frequencies, we can swap standbys and actives, and we've got control of both of those there. So the next video, what I'll do is I'll talk you through some of how these functions work on this side here, the sort of GPS side of things. I don't know every single function, but I'm getting closer to it, so I'll discover a little bit more each day, and then we'll start to program that. It may take us 2 videos to do this, well, maybe in 1. We'll see how we get on, but that's where we're going to go for the next video. So I'll see you there for the next one.